Alrighty, in lesson 5.6, we're also going to be dealing with quadratic equations and complex numbers. Woo, they are complex. Alrighty, here we have some special notes. These are special notes. Alright, so we're going to deal with imaginary numbers here. We talked a little bit about them in class. And what we know is that I is equal to the square root of negative 1. Okay, this is how we deal with negatives underneath the square root. And this is just an introduction. It gets obviously way more intricate than what we're ever going to see in this class, but here's an introduction to imaginary numbers. So we know that I equals the square root of negative 1. Well, how would you figure out I squared? Well, think about it this way. If I have the square root of negative 1, which is I, and I'm going to square that, what happens to the square and the square root? Well, they cancel, and I'm just left with the negative 1, which is what you see right there. So let's check out I cubed. Well, I know that these two, the I squared part's just going to give me negative 1, and then right here, the square root of negative 1 is just I. Well, negative 1 times I gives me negative I. And then I to the fourth. Well, I have I squared and I squared, which is negative 1 and negative 1, right? I get I squared and I squared to make I to the fourth. So I get negative 1 times negative 1 gives me positive 1. So we'll use these a little bit in some of the problems that we're going to do today. We're going to be doing some operations with our complex numbers. So the operations with imaginary numbers, you can almost treat the I like an x, okay, like a variable when we're adding and subtracting and whatnot. The only time it really doesn't work that way is when you end up having like an I squared, and we know that I squared from the last slide, right, I squared is equal to negative 1. So anytime we see an I squared, we're going to replace that with a negative 1. So let's try a couple of these, shall we? I think we shall. Well, if I have addition here, I'm really just going to be combining my like terms because I don't have to distribute a negative like I've done in the past. If this were subtraction here, then I'd have to distribute that negative. But otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and combine my like terms. Well, negative 3 and 7 gives me 4, and then 5i and negative 6i gives me negative 1i, so just negative I, and here's my final answer. Woo! That was a doozy. The next one, here I have to distribute 2i and 2i goes to both the 5 and the 5i. Well, 2i times 5 is going to give me 10i, just like if you had 2x times 5 gives you 10x. And then 2i times 5i gives me 10i squared. Ooh. What did I say about this up here? Okay, well, this I squared is going to need to become a negative 1. Well, let's think about that. If I have 10i plus 10 times negative 1, what I really have is 10i minus 10. And the way I like to write these, the real number first, and then our imaginary number. So it's going to be negative 10 plus 10i. All right, real first, then imaginary. Ooh, this next one looks awesome. We're going to be doing some FOIL. So first, outer, inner, last. Never goes away, guys. Sorry. So we have 2 times negative 5 gives me negative 10. 2 times negative 3i gives me negative 6i. I times negative 5 gives me negative 5i. And then I times negative 3i gives me negative 3i squared. Okay. Well, it looks like right here I can combine my like terms, and right here I need to deal with the I squared being a negative 1. Let's do that all in one step. I have negative 10 minus 11i, and then I have negative 3 times negative 1. So that gives me positive 3, so I have negative 10 minus 11i plus 3. And now I can combine my integers right here and here, and I get negative 7 minus 11i. Boom. Last one. Woo! Well, right here I can distribute this squared part into both. Only reason why I can do that is because it's only multiplication in here. If it were addition in here, I can't distribute that. I have to FOIL it. Don't forget. So negative 2 squared gives me positive 4. I squared gives me negative 1. So I end up with negative 4. Awesome. You guys are great. You're great. Thanks for listening.